G'day guys and welcome to Aussie English. My objective here is to teach you guys the English spoken down under. So whether you want to speak like a fair income Aussie, or you just want to understand what the flippin' hell we're on about when we're having a yarn, you've come to the right place. So sit back, grab a cuppa and enjoy Aussie English. G'day guys, welcome to this episode of Aussie English. Today is an interview episode. I have some company today because you might be able to hear him in the background. I am currently living in Canberra and we managed to find a place to live with some friends for the first month or so because they were going overseas. They needed someone to take care of their dogs. So we're in their house at the moment, but man, their dogs... They're beautiful animals, but Jack, one of them, is really neurotic. He needs a lot of attention. He does not like to be on his own. So anytime I try and go and do anything on my own, such as record the introduction to a podcast, Jack comes with me, and he's currently sitting on the couch, pressed up against me, resting. So hopefully he doesn't make too much noise. I guess we'll see. But yeah, this is the first podcast I've done with a small dog next to me. So anyway, guys, welcome to the Aussie English Podcast, the number one podcast for anyone and everyone learning Australian English. It also obviously helps with English in general, but Australian English is the main focus here. Today I have a really good episode for you guys. I sit down again with my mate James Buchan. He has been on the podcast at least 2 other times, chatting about cars, which is probably, would be his biggest hobby. He's a massive rev head, loves his cars, and today we talk about a few different things before we get onto cars, including coffee culture in Australia and how that has changed over recent years, I guess maybe the last decade or two, that we've at least experienced it as people in our 30s. We chat a little bit about beer and craft beers as well, and these microbreweries that are popping up all over the place. There's loads of different microbrewery beers that you can buy now that are sort of made in small batches in very sort of localized places that you won't find everywhere in Australia, let alone overseas. So we talk about that, and then we get on to the rivalry between Ford and Holden. So this is one of the biggest rivalries that doesn't involve, I guess, a ball sport in Australia. And this one, unlike AFL and rugby, this one tends to be nationwide. So everyone in Australia in all locations tends to sort of have a preference for either Ford or Holden. Okay, so we'll get into that, guys, and we'll talk a bit about the racing of V8s that is common in Australia and a bit of a pastime that lots of Australians like. And yeah, we just shoot the shit, guys. We have a chat, pretty informal. Sit back, guys. It's about half an hour, and I hope you enjoy it. So anyway, without any further ado, let's get into it, guys. James, take it away. All right. Welcome back to the Aussie English Podcast, Jimmy.
Thanks, Pete. Good to be back.
Got a beer here for each of us. Open those puppies up.
Love a beer. Thank you.
So you wanted the IPA.
I'll have the IPA.
I'll have the summer ale.
Cheers. Thank you.
All right. So I've got you back today to chat about selling cars in Australia, and I guess we can chat about a few other things as well.
Yep.
Because you love driving around.
Yeah.
Don't you?
I've done a fair bit of it the other day, so it's good fun.
Maybe we can start with that. So you live down in Geelong. I'm about to live down in Geelong. So
yep.
We live down in Geelong. We grew up here.
Yeah.
Down this side of the coast, which I guess is the southwest side of Port Phillip Bay.
Yeah.
What are the interesting tourist attractions down here? The sites that you can go to that are within, a day's drive or are a day's trip?
Not so much locally within the centre of Geelong itself, but out from Geelong, you've got the Yuyangs, or I guess if you head down the coast, you've got Ocean Grove, Barwon Heads, Queenscliff. If you take the ferry over, you can get over to Sorrento.
And that's on the other side.
That's on the other side of the bay. Or you could go down the Great Ocean Road. You could go down as far as Apollo Bay or keep on going to see the 12 Apostles if you wanted.
How would you describe the towns down here? Barwon Heads, Ocean Grove, Point Lonsdale, Torquay. What do you like about them?
They're funny because in winter, they're pretty quiet. They're just little seaside towns, and you've just got the people who live there year-round. But as soon as it gets to summertime, the tourists, they come from everywhere.
It freaking explodes.
It freaking explodes, yeah. And it's really busy. It seems like there's a lot of rental houses and the population doubles. But it's good, though. There's a lot of people
crazy.
around.
We grew up here. I think Dad used to tell me, he was like, we used to holiday down here when it was probably the 60s, maybe the 70s, that they were coming down to Ocean Grove, and it was a swamp.
Yeah.
Which is what I can look over my parents' house currently, and there's a wetlands down there, and I think that the wetlands is probably a few acres of fenced-off lake and surrounding bush.
Yep.
That's probably all that's left of the swamp.
And if it wasn't there, there'd be houses.
Exactly. Well, That's it. And at the time when Dad was coming down, he was saying there were only a handful of houses on the terrace, the main strip of Ocean Grove here.
It seems hard to believe.
And nowadays, it's probably, 20 to 30,000 full-time inhabitants.
Easily, yeah.
And then in summer, it probably goes to maybe now upwards of 70,000.
Yeah, that would not be a joke.
It'd double or triple.
And even on the way down, you're seeing all of these new housing estates being built.
Yeah,
it's the same when you head down to, say, Torquay. You're seeing like Warralilly and all of these different subdivisions and estates being built. I guess my issue with them is that they don't have a heap of trees and a lot of greenness.
Yeah.
And I like that, so... Yeah, and that's one of the good things about getting out of Geelong and I guess going for a walk or a drive is that you get to see some of that.
So what would you suggest people do if they come to these seaside towns? What's a nice day out if you come to Ocean Grove or Barwon Heads?
What I would do is probably park the car somewhere. I'd find...
It's free parking,
It is free parking.
Free parking, guys. We're out of the city.
So I'd pick a good day, make sure the weather's all right, and then I'd find a good park somewhere and either go for a walk or get fish and chips, grab an ice cream. If the weather's good enough, you could go for a swim, or if you've got a boogie board. I don't know what another term for those are, but bodyboards. Yeah. Just
those are those thin foam or rubber boards that are kind of rectangular in shape, but the tip would taper in, right? So it's almost pointed, but not really.
Yeah. And
you can ride waves on your belly.
Yeah, it's like surfing, but not quite as...
It's a little easier.
You
don't have to worry about standing up.
Exactly. Yeah, no, they're generally pretty good things to do. Yeah. It's just a pretty cruisy kind of atmosphere. You just sort of wander around, chill out, get food, relax.
That's it. And the coffee culture's really come down here now in the last 5 or 10 years from Melbourne.
Yeah, it's sort of slowly started to seep down from Melbourne, hasn't it? And it's almost impossible now to get a bad coffee within Melbourne, Geelong, Barwon Heads, Ocean Grove, Queenscliff. Yeah. You'd pretty much be assured.
You almost have to go out of your way and hunt down the worst
bad coffee. You do. That sounds like something I should try at some point.
Where can we get the worst coffee in Ocean Grove or down the coast here? Yeah, that's it. It's really funny how that's become such a cultural thing of cafe culture all over Australia. Yeah. Not just in Melbourne, the CBD, but out in the surf coast here. I'm sure it's bleeding or seeping into the outback as well.
Have Australians become coffee snobs? Because
the standards have just been raised.
The standards have been raised. Well, that's it. I was in Europe a couple of years ago, driving through Austria, and we stopped at this little roadside, restaurant kind of little thing, and they had the waitresses and the waiters, and they were all dressed in the typical kind of German, Austrian kind of outfits, and they brought us these cups of coffees, and they were just awful. Yeah. And my hopes were really quite high, and the expectation was, and I thought, has Australian coffee ruined me? I think it has.
I think it's one of those things, though, where there must have been, one cafe or a small group of cafes that popped up all of a sudden that just had that combination of whatever it is that makes a good coffee nailed. They got it right. And then all of a sudden people went there and were like,
this is really good.
I can do this. Yeah, it's awesome, and I can do this. And they've just slowly just migrated out. Yeah. And it's just spread everywhere.
Yep.
And it's happening before our eyes. I'm sure you could still go into some pretty rural areas in outback Australia.
And still get a decent coffee.
A bad one.
Yeah.
As well as maybe a good one, but I think you'd still be able to find average ones where there's just not the consumer culture. But the funny thing is the tourist attractions probably have really good coffee now too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Uluru in the middle of the... smack bang in the middle of Australia probably has good coffee.
They built an airport there. It makes sense that they have good coffee there too.
I know, that's just amazing. It's so funny that Australia's become such a coffee cultured nation. It's really bizarre, isn't it? When you think about out of all the world.
You don't associate Australia with being, amazing with coffee.
I guess another thing to talk about is the beer.
Yeah, I mean, that's something
that's only come up recently.
That's only really come up recently. It only seems like...
What do you call them? Microbreweries. Craft beers.
Craft beers. I mean, if I want to sort of put them down a bit, you'd call them hipster beers. But there just seemed to be several years ago not much choice.
Yeah.
You had VB, Carlton Draft. If you were in Queensland, it might have been 4X.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, people started to, much like the coffee, think, hang on a tick.
Yeah.
We can make our own or... Yeah. And again, it's just exploded. There's just so much more choice. It's not just beers, it's ciders as well.
I think it's the hipster culture too that's just bled into the entire nation with regards to these kind of small products that are homegrown, homemade, It was literally one man and his dog who found this thing and turned it into something that could be consumed. That people almost now stray away from
the really mainstream. Yeah,
that's it. The big products. No one wants the common stuff that everyone has.
It's seen as untrendy.
That's it. They all want to be hipsters who bring the beer that no one's heard of.
That's right.
Who have the coffee that no one's ever tasted. It's so true.
I went to a friend's house recently, and we were sort of joking about the beer a little. Mm-hmm. And it's really weird. His brother loves VB. Loves it. And
they're a dying breed, aren't they?
They are a dying breed.
People who stand by VB.
And I went to his house and I said to him, so what would you do if I brought VB? And he said, well, it would probably sit in my fridge for a long time and not actually get drunk.
Yeah.
He said, I would actually prefer to turn up to someone's house empty-handed than come round bearing VB as a gift for them.
It's an insult.
It was an insult.
That'd be like bringing pre-ground coffee to a coffee connoisseur's house.
Nescafe Blend 43.
Instant coffee. Yeah, that's it. My grandfather was like that at Christmas. He drinks a beer every now and then, and mainly wine, but he had all these VBs and he didn't know where they'd come from, and he was like, they're out because I want you guys to drink them and get rid of them.
I'm not going to have them.
I was like, I guess I'll have it. But it's, VB and Carlton Draft and 4X. How would you explain them? They're the most popular beers probably just because they're the most benign, like just really lacking in any kind of complexity or taste. And you can drink them like water.
You can. They're not a high-strength alcohol, so you won't really get hammered off them unless you drink a lot.
Yeah.
They don't have a huge amount of flavour.
Yeah.
They're not really light like a Corona, so they're just sort of in no man's land. They do almost nothing for me. I'd rather have a glass of water or lemonade. And I guess why a lot of people don't like them as well is they're owned by, these big corporations. So Carlton Draft, and I think that's owned by like Sab Miller or something like that. So a big multinational.
It is so funny that just that culture, I guess, too, of Australia just going towards the small guys, and wanting to support locals. I mean, I don't know where this is. What's this? John Boston Beer, Australia's first brewer, 1796. Holy moly. But there's some other beers that I've seen recently, and we went out to a pub in Queenscliff, you, me and Kel recently, and the beers we got were made in Queenscliff.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think I saw them and was like, oh yeah, hell yeah, I'll get those.
Absolutely.
One, I've never had them, but two, they were made in this small town.
Exactly. It's a good thing to support.
Yeah.
To support like a local business. I think especially in Geelong too, because over the last, say, 15, 20 years, Geelong's, I guess, manufacturing or employment scene has changed a lot. We had Qantas, they serviced their jumbo jets here. We had Shell, the refinery. We had Ford, they built cars here. And that's all just disappeared.
Yeah.
So for someone to sort of set up their own brewery in Queenscliff and, do something that's, sort of handcrafted.
We need to start waiting for people to start making their own cars in their garage and selling them, making one a year and selling their own cars.
I always thought that'd be pretty cool.
That's cool. So talk a little bit about what happened with Ford.
Well,
in Geelong. So Ford was one of the biggest employers
they were.
of people down here in Geelong. And
Yeah.
Ford is probably Australia's equal most or most popular
Brand of
car
car,
company.
yeah.
Brand of car.
And
And so what happened recently with that?
well, I guess there were a lot of things. You could talk about the politics, the Australian government not really wanting to put funding into Ford and Holden, so
Yeah.
the local car manufacturers.
So they saw that they were sinking,
they saw
at
that
least
that was
locally.
Yeah, and I think from a really, really, really long-term perspective, we had a huge amount of car manufacturers or cars that were locally made in Australia. We had Mercedes.
Oh, really? They were made here?
We had Mercedes made here. We had Leylands, like Rovers and all of that kind of stuff.
Were they British?
They were British. We had
Yeah.
Nissan, used to make the Skyline here.
Really?
We had all sorts of stuff that was made here.
Mm-hmm.
You had the Mitsubishi Sigma, which then turned into the Magna. That was made here as well. You had all of these Chrysler products. And I guess the writing was on the wall for a really, really long time because...
Well, during this time too, sorry to interrupt you,
That's
it was
all right.
probably that we had a larger part of our population working in factories, right?
Yeah.
And doing labour jobs like that because it was still affordable
Yeah.
to purchase products that were made in Australia.
That's right. And due to economics, due to politics, I guess the more manufacturers that start pulling out because they just don't find it profitable, a lot of like the small supply chains that support these manufacturers, they can't sustain only producing for maybe one or two brands, and it just becomes unsustainable. And I guess that's really what sort of happened with Ford. There's so many different little pieces to the puzzle, but effectively the writing was on the wall. It was not sustainable. I think also with a couple of the Ford engines, they had emissions regulations that they needed to meet, and if they wanted to meet these new stringent emissions regulations, they would have had to have redesigned the engine.
Okay.
And I guess for a company that only was producing for the Australian market and not a worldwide market, it was really hard to justify. And perhaps when they were initially developing the certain car platforms, perhaps they should have developed it to be left-hand drive as well, so it could have been exported. I know Holden did with some of their cars, but hindsight, the benefit of hindsight, should have, would have, could have. Anyway, Ford finished up.
So they were the last two big ones, right?
They
Holden
were.
and Ford were the last two factories or brands in Australia of car to be made here, manufactured here in Australia. And
That's right.
When did they close?
So Holden produced their last car in October 2017 or thereabouts.
So that was this year.
That was this year, and Ford finished up. I think it was like the year or so before.
Yeah.
Toyota finished also in October this year. So I've got a colleague at work, and her husband had just finished up at Toyota. So I think he's trying to switch his career to being an electrician, and it's put a lot of people out of work. But then I guess if we switch it back to beers, there's a lot of people that did have other skills that could have moved into perhaps one of their hobbies and were able to make a job out of it. So
I guess that's one of the really good things about microbreweries, or just that culture of people at home making something small time and getting it out there as a small time business. It is really cool that they can do that as a living, and it is good that you don't rely on companies like Ford or Holden that could go bust and leave you in the dark.
That's right. And I guess, not that I don't really blame some of these workers that have suddenly found themselves out of jobs, but I guess the writing was on the wall for a long time with all of these manufacturers slowly over the years that were starting to finish up. And it slowly started to dry up. You probably could see what was going to happen. And the government was less and less interested to providing, assistance for these car manufacturers. And as Australians, I guess we also got a lot of choice with the cars that we have. I think we have almost more than any other country in the world in terms of new cars for sale. So,
Can you tell us about that? Did we talk about that in the last podcast?
We
about
might
the
have
different
done.
brands that are in Australia?
We've got like 66 different brands. And so I think as a country, we've just pretty much switched to an all-importing country now because for such a small population, it just didn't really make financial sense to have car manufacturing located here.
It's crazy.
For a population of only 22 million or so. So,
yeah.
Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing, I guess. We've got a lot of choice.
Too, does the fact that we have such big distances between cities and tourist attractions, has that affected the kinds of cars that you find in Australia compared to places that are smaller countries like Britain?
I would say it certainly has. I mean, that's what the Holden Commodores and the Ford Falcons were sort of marketed as. You know, they were developed here in Australia to cover big, long distances. And I know when you go into the centre of Melbourne these days, if you go into the centre of Melbourne or Sydney, you will find a lot of small little cars. But I do know that, you know, when you go into the outback, for instance, or you go to rural regional towns, we went to this little town called Hay, which was sort of in the centre of New South Wales a year or two ago.
And that there's always that joke of, hey, it's Hay!
Exactly. And it was just full of Land Cruisers.
Really?
Literally every second car was a Land Cruiser. And you can't really blame them.
So, yeah, like, that was the thing that I guess I came to be aware of maybe in my teens once I was thinking about cars and thinking about purchasing cars, was that Holden and Ford were uniquely in Australia, and that the cars that Holden and Ford made, or at least Holden and Ford that were in Australia, the cars they made were uniquely here.
Yep.
You didn't really see them overseas, or at least when they were exported overseas, they were kind of rebadged and sold in a different manner.
Yeah.
Why were they so unique in Australia the way that they were? Why was that cultural difference with those cars and the requirements so different from, say, America?
We have a big country. We liked a big roomy car. We liked to drive. We still do. We like to drive long distances. And we had, at the time, I guess you were talking about, you know, the labour force as well. So it was economical to build and design a car here. And I guess the Commodore, at least, originally started as a German car. I think it was like an Opel.
Oh, really?
An Opel of some sort. And they brought it to Australia. They did some testing with it, and it broke in half.
How did it break in half?
Our country just broke it. The Australian outback, the roads, they were too rough. There were too many stones, sand, dirt. It got in the car, it just broke in half. So Holden, which I think it was owned by General Motors at the time, economically it was viable at that point, and they decided to redesign the Commodore for Australian conditions.
Can you talk about the Commodore and the Falcon? What exactly are those two, and how are they rivals? Why did they become rivals?
They became rivals, I guess.
And to put that in context, the Commodore is a type of car that is made by Holden, and the Falcon is effectively the equivalent type of car made by Ford.
That's right.
And this is this like entrenched competitive team, right?
Yeah.
You're on one or the other. There don't tend to be many people who care about cars and like them both.
And I was one of those people at one point.
So was I. I always went Holden. Loved Holdens.
Me too. And now I'm completely indifferent. I can see the merits of both of them.
The funniest thing for me, I guess, before we get into the nitty gritty, is that they were the same. It was the same shit. Like the cars looked exactly the same, effectively, but just had different badges.
Yeah, pretty much.
The features were all the same. They were literally rip-offs of one another, or you know, the same twin brothers that were non-identical twin brothers.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. They drove the same. They looked the same. They had roughly the same size engines. But I guess it's like a football team, to put it as a British reference, for Arsenal and Manchester United. You know, you're either one or the other. You can't support them both.
Yeah.
And you know, every year, and I think it was around October, you'd get Holden and Ford supporters. They'd go up to Bathurst, which is in New South Wales. They'd drink a huge amount of beer or wine. They'd get absolutely messed up. They'd possibly start a fight, and they'd be...
And what was Bathurst, though, for the context of the listeners?
It's a car race, so much like the grand final or anything like that.
This is like Australia's Formula One, right? But it's in these Bogeymobiles.
These taxis that were never really designed for out-and-out racing.
Souped-up taxis,
And I can talk a little bit about that in a moment.
Yeah, but go for it.
They would go up there, they would drink an enormous amount of beer...
Yeah,
and they would race these cars around and around and around for about 7 hours.
Yeah.
And so it was a real endurance race. And
this is like Australia's just I guess it's our version of car racing was just Bathurst. Yeah, right. Like we didn't really focus too much on rallying or the Formula One stuff.
No,
it was at least for the average battler, working class Australian.
It was something that they could relate to, despite the fact that if we gloss over in these later years, these cars. They were nothing like the cars that you could go into a showroom and buy. They were tubular framed. They had hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, and they were nothing.
So what,
like
they just had to look like?
They just had to look like it.
So they had the casing, the shell of a Commodore or a Falcon.
But effectively, they were nothing like it at all.
And how did the rules work? Because that race only had those two cars, right?
Yeah.
It just had sedan Commodores, or it just had sedan Falcons. And it was just those two cars.
And I guess it worked for a long period of time.
Was that the rule, though? That there were no other cars
initially
allowed?
It wasn't. We used to have the Minis. We used to have some Jaguars. We had BMWs. Ford brought out their Sierra Cosworth from the UK. And then Nissan decided to bring out their Skyline GTR. Mm-hmm. And that was already, that was dominating in Japan with their touring car kind of scene over there. And they brought it to Australia. It was sort of developed, I guess, in Adelaide, and I think that they called it Gibson Motorsport was the company that developed it, and they gave it a weight penalty to try and make sure that it would be somewhat competitive with all the other cars.
So what's a weight penalty exactly?
So what they did was they added weight to the car to make it heavier so that it would be as comparable as the other cars that were racing around Bathurst at the time.
How's that done exactly?
They would put, I don't know whether it was lead or quite what they would do. I don't think it was concrete, but they would add ballast to the car.
Yeah.
And they would put it in certain areas, hoping that would slow the car down because it was more momentum that it had to carry around.
It was just a handicap to make it even.
To make it even, but the Skyline was twin turbo. It was all-wheel drive, and
it was not an even race. It's kind of like having camels versus horses, and like maybe putting weight on the horses to make it even. And it's like they're just different animals.
Exactly. And I mean, when you think about it, one of the cars, the Commodores and the Falcons, at that point they were still sort of loosely based on a road car, designed for touring around the country with a family and a big boot full of gear and. Yes,
Do you think that was the appeal then? The fact that people who were just everyday Australian battlers...
Absolutely, that was the appeal.
Working collar dudes, just blue-collar workers, would be able to go to the racetrack and see their car.
Absolutely.
Racing
they thought they thought, that's me. That's me. And there was this mantra that was called win on Sunday, sell on Monday. So what would happen, they used to sell a lot of them. If the company, Holden or Ford, won, they would sell a lot of them. But
really?
This Skyline GTR, it came in and it decimated. They added more weight to it. Yeah. It still beat them. Yeah. They tried to get it to turn the turbochargers boost down. It still beat them.
Yeah.
And there was one race at Bathurst where the Skyline GTR won. It was kind of controversial in terms of how it finished. And when the two winners got up onto the podium, they were booed.
Can't have a Japanese car winning an Australian race, mate. Jeez.
Absolutely not. And
especially over a Commodore or a Falcon.
And the driver of the Skyline GTR, Jim Richards, he said he was a New Zealander, I think. Mm. And he said to the audience on the podium, "You're all a pack of arseholes." And after that, they couldn't handle that their beloved Commodores and Falcons had been beaten. So instead of, adding more weight to the Skyline, they just decided to ban them.
What?
So instead of making it competitive, just outlaw it. So
that's probably the easiest way.
No all-wheel drive, no turbos.
Yeah.
It's like alcohol prohibition or anything else. If you don't want something, just make it illegal.
Just fixes it.
And so then they had only the Falcons or the Commodores. And for me, that kind of ruined the racing because you got to see all of these different cars and they all had their strengths and weaknesses. And by effectively having it as a two-horse race, they're two shades of the same shit, it lost a lot of the appeal for me. Yeah. But for a lot of people, it didn't. But then I guess you could see the writing on the wall because when Holden and Ford, the writing was on the wall for them that they were finishing up production. The category V8 supercars had to change. So they called it supercars. Yep. They tried to invite more brands. So Nissan... They had Mercedes as well at one point. I don't think Mercedes is in it now.
Just the AMGs or something?
That's right. It didn't really align with their brand strategy because the consumer of a Mercedes-Benz and AMG does not really align with someone who watches V8 supercars. They're in a slightly different...
Someone who buys those really nice European cars doesn't tend to go to Bathurst and sink VB while screaming at the Holdens and the Fords.
No, they're in a slightly different income bracket. So Mercedes, they partook for a while, but they're out of it now. And as of as of the end of 2017, there will be no more V8s. So they had to really readjust their marketing or their brand strategy, and I think we're starting to see a swing back to what it was with all of these different types and sizes of engines. So effectively, at least in my opinion, the blanket ban on turbocharged all-wheel drive or different types of cars just because their favourite cars were being beaten was the wrong thing to do, and it was a knee-jerk reaction, and we're sort of slowly seeing a swing back to a bit more of an open, diverse field.
So have you been to Bathurst before to watch it?
I've never been. No. It's something, I guess, if I was on holidays at the time and I was in the area, I might go past, and maybe it might be on the cards for me in my future at some point. But yeah.
Oh, crazy.
Anyway, so that's Australian car racing in a nutshell.
So do you think the fact that Holden-Ford have gone offshore, at least in their manufacturing, and you just said V8s are about to be no longer made, are they?
Not for this category, for V8 supercars.
Oh, okay. So it's not that the factories have stopped making them; it's just that they're killing it for this race.
So they're killed it for this race, and Holden and Ford will be importers only of V8 cars. So if you want to buy a V8 from Holden or Ford, with Ford you'll be able to buy a V8 Mustang. You can buy them. There are already a few of them being sold here.
Yeah, I saw lots of them. I was wondering where they were coming from.
Yeah, they're a popular car. There's a lot of them. And Holden's bringing in the Camaro from America.
It's so funny that they just constantly match one another with the different styles. They try and get an equivalent on either side.
I think Holden didn't really expect that the Mustang would really sell.
Yeah.
And it sold like hotcakes, and I guess they were just sitting there sort of watching, being taken completely by surprise.
Yeah.
And they were sort of sitting on their hands doing nothing, and they realised that they needed to have a competitor and they needed to get a piece of that action. So,
do you think that's a wise decision, buying a 5 to 7 litre V8 in today's day and age, especially with petrol prices in Australia?
Not if you're going to use it every day. If that's really your thing, then by all means go ahead and buy it. I'm guessing if you can afford it brand new, you can probably afford the fuel.
Yeah.
But it's certainly not for me. And the trend is to get smaller engines. They're more efficient. And
do you think that's partly related to the increase in fuel price here in Australia and over the last 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, and more globally as well, because it doesn't make sense to make a car just for Australia, even if our fuel prices are cheaper. So if fuel prices are expensive everywhere else in the world, but the fuel price here is cheaper, it still makes sense to have like one global product. And I guess you can achieve similar kind of power levels these days with turbos or hybrids. So it kind of makes sense to have a smaller engine that makes just as much power, and that's sort of what we're seeing.
Yeah.
So, it's an interesting landscape.
So can you talk to a bit about, I guess, how these two types of cars, how do they differ and what characterises them? How are they different from other brands?
The Ford and
Can you describe the Commodore and the Falcon?
Yeah. So they're big and they're comfortable. They don't really handle all that well, although they have made improvements over the last few years before their decline. So big and comfortable, good for covering long distance. The Ford had a straight six engine. The Commodores, they had V6s, and then of course you had the V8 options from Ford and Holden. Holden had a couple of, they were using LS engines, so Chevrolet kind of crate engines. And then Ford, they were using they used an engine called the Miami, which is a 5 litre supercharged V8 on their last Falcons before they sort of shut up shop. They were a pretty good engine. We had a friend that worked for Ford for a while doing some of the development for them. So he was a test driver, and he would bring out the cars and we would get to have a ride in them. And I guess basically the goal was to just put kilometres on them.
Not thrash them. Or both.
Or both, I guess, just to see what would...
As long as it was legal.
As long as it was legal, just to see what would happen. If anything broke, if any issues cropped up, so that by the time these cars were put into production, that they would have, I guess, sought out all of these little bugs.
Yeah.
So, I remember we went for a drive to Anarchy, and, we would just go drive around in these cars. Sometimes it was a little small Ford Focus, or it could have been a Falcon. But primarily the Falcons were just really great for covering long distances. They were really comfortable. The interiors were quite nice on them towards the end with the leather interior. The engines had a lot of power, but they were a big car.
Yeah. That's the trade-off, right? The turning circle.
The turning circle, the fuel economy.
They're going to be a bitch to reverse park.
Yeah, and you might not want that. I guess if you're a single person or you're a young couple, especially if you're in the city, Melbourne or Sydney, that's not really all that great anymore, because I guess the cities have changed as well. Parking spaces in Melbourne as well. There's not many spaces to park. These cars are big. So it makes sense you get something smaller, but if you're out in the country, then I guess if you were driving between Melbourne and Sydney, that'd be a great car to have.
Yeah, they're tops.
Yeah, and we did that a couple of years ago. We went to Sydney to buy a car for a friend, and we took up my parents' Commodore. We just put the cruise control on 110. It was a really easy drive. We switched drivers a couple of times just to make the trip a little bit easier, but you just put the cruise control on and the music, and the car was good for that. That's what I maintain they were designed for. Yeah. And they can take insane amounts of kilometres, right? That's right. Provided they're looked after, they can keep on going and going and going. We had an X-Taxi, so an X-AU Falcon taxi that we bought, and that went for 750,000 kilometres. I think it was like 800 plus, wasn't it? I think your brother said. I was chatting to Dave the other day, James's brother, and I think he was saying it was above 800. It could well have been. It had a truly insane amount of kilometres on it. It's 3/4 of the way to 1,000,000 kilometres. Yeah, but the engine, it was still the same engine. It had just been, looked after, I guess, the parts that needed to be replaced. So let's say the radiator might have failed at some point. You replace the radiator or you do general servicing on it, but just kept on going. And that's the great thing about them. And I think there's a real sort of stigma behind buying a car and seeing the numbers click up on it, thinking, okay, it's got over 100,000 Ks now. It's time for me to get rid of it because it's going to break. I mean, if that was, that might have been true 30 years ago if you had like an old British Leyland where I guess manufacturing tolerances weren't as good. But these days, I guess, like the cylinder wall clearance, the piston clearance, all of that kind of stuff, it's a lot more tightly controlled. The engines are a lot better built. And the good thing is, I guess, especially if you get Ford or Holden, is that they're just cheap as chips to repair. Are. And they're so easy to work on as well. And the other good thing is, because they did sell so many of them, there's parts everywhere. Yeah. So it doesn't really... It's the kind of thing that you could break down in the desert and the next mechanic you get to can repair it. And that's exactly what my brother and I did. We bought that AU fully aware that we were going out to, remote New South Wales. In the middle of buttfuck nowhere. But if the car broke down, we were going to have the parts in order to fix it, because we did a similar trip several years before that. My brother and I foolishly bought an Alfa Romeo. Ask me how that worked out. This is an Italian car. Yeah. The wrong kind of Italian car, though, James. It's not a Ferrari. It isn't. You get none of the power and all of the unreliability. What a deal. So, let's say something broke on that, and you're screwed. Good luck trying to find a radiator or, some other part to keep it going. You'd be well and truly screwed.
Awesome, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview episode with James. Once again, James, massive thank you for coming on the podcast. There's quite a few interviews that I've done with him talking about a bunch of other things, so I am sure that you will hear from him soon in the future. And I know that he has a pretty general accent that is easy to understand. So hopefully you guys enjoy hearing from James. Just a quick message. Remember, if you would like to support the podcast and everything that I do, guys, don't forget that you can sign up to be a patron via my Patreon page. The link will be in the description or in the transcript here. You can choose to donate anything from $1 per month upwards. It's totally up to you guys. You can cancel at any time, but it helps me do what I do. So if you'd like to give back, that is one way you can do so. The second way is obviously by signing up to the Aussie English Classroom. This is an online classroom. It's a website, theaussieenglishclassroom.com. This is where you get all the bonus content that goes with episodes from the podcast, whether it's the expression episodes that you get on the weekends at the moment, or whether it's these interview episodes. And for today's episode, you will get a 5 to 10 minute transcript. We'll look at the vocab and the interesting expressions and slang that we use in that sort of 5 to 10 minute excerpt from today's interview. You'll then get a listening comprehension exercise where you can test your listening abilities on the website with a quiz, and you will get access to all the previous interviews as well. So if you're trying to really get your head around, wrap your head around all the different Aussie accents, this is the best way to do so, guys. Remember, you can sign up and it's $1 for the first month. You can cancel at any time, but I promise you're not going to be disappointed. Anyway, guys, that's enough for today. Jack says bye, even though he's sort of just nodding off in the background here, lying on the couch. It's been a pleasure chatting to you as usual, guys. And I should mention, don't forget to check out the videos on YouTube, as I'll be doing a little breakdown of the most interesting expressions for this episode on YouTube. So keep an eye out for that. Anyway, guys, enjoy your week. Chat to you soon. G'day, mate. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Aussie English Podcast. If you wish to support the podcast and help me keep bringing you content, you can do so via my Patreon page. Remember, it's my mission here at Aussie English not only to help you understand Australian English, but to speak it like a native. If that's your goal, make sure you enroll in the Aussie English Classroom, guys, where you'll get all the bonus content for today's episode designed to improve your English even faster. Have a ripper of a day, and I'll see you in class.